So now we're going to go into more about the Pali tradition specifically. So Buddhism spread to Sri Lanka, China, Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia many centuries before coming to Tibet. As our elder brothers and sisters, I pay respect to you. So His Holiness always has that attitude when he meets people from other Buddhist traditions, that they are senior in the Dharma to the Tibetans. Modern-day Theravada was derived from the Theravada, one of the 18 schools in ancient India. So the name Theravada does not seem to have indicated a school in India prior to Buddhism having gone to Sri Lanka. Okay, so the reason for this is that in Sri Lanka, or in Theravada history, they have a certain idea that they are the one pure lineage that stemmed from the Buddha, and it was called Theravada at the time of the Buddha, and went in complete pure lineage down to what it is today without anything having changed. So here we see that even the name Theravada, doesn't seem to have been around before Buddhism went to Sri Lanka. And here it says, the Sinhala Historical Chronicle, the Dipavamsa, used the name Theravada in the 4th century to describe the Buddhism on the island. Yeah, but it wasn't a word that was prominently used or spread around really until later. Okay, there were 3 Theravada subgroups, each with a monastery bearing its name: the Abhayagiri, the Mahavihara, and Jetavana. Okay, so in India, actually, and according to Tibetan records, when you have the 18 schools, under Theravada, you have these 3 as different Theravada schools. Okay, but listen to what happens. Okay, the Abhayagiri Theravadas had close connections with India and brought in many Sanskrit elements. The Jetavanas did this as well, but to a lesser extent, while the Mahavirans maintained the orthodox Theravada teachings. In the 12th century, the king abolished the Abhayagiri and Jetavana traditions and amalgamated these monks with the Mahavihara, which has since remained prominent. Okay, so what happened is you had 2 of the 3 main monasteries that were incorporating Mahayana elements and Tantric elements. And so you find in some places in Sri Lanka, different statues to Avalokiteshvara and, sometimes, Mahayana inscriptions and things like that. So there was always this kind of thing between the 3 monasteries, a little bit of competition, as kind of natural human beings. And depending upon which king was in power, one or the other monastery would be favored. So it, kind of went back and forth for a while. And then in the 12th century, one king who was very powerful said, everybody's got to be Mahavihara. And he said to the monks at Abhayagiri and Jetavana, either you disrobe or you become Mahavihara monks. So he kind of didn't give them much of a chance. And then after that, the king went, and with the Mahavihara monks, they then removed all these heterodox, sutras and things like that had come from India in the wave with the Mahayana, okay? So you find in, many Theravada countries, historically, you'll find Mahayana elements, but then they got, suppressed. Buddhism suffered greatly after the Sri Lanka capital fell to the Kola forces, that was some Indian forces, in 1017. The Bhikshu and Bhikshuni orders were destroyed, although the Bhikshu order was restored when the Sri Lankan king invited monks from Burma to come and give the ordination. The Buddha Dharma thrived once again in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka came to be seen as the center of the Theravada world. When the state of Theravada teachings or its ordination lineages in one country were adversely affected, leaders would request monks from another Theravada country to come and give ordination. And this has continued up until the present day. Okay, so, in times of warfare, it's very easy, or political upheaval, for the Sangha to be suppressed. And so that's what happened. And up until that time, it seems like there was a Bhikshuni, communities as well. But everybody got wiped out with the Kola invasion. And then they sent for monks to Burma to come and give the ordination. And so this started a whole way that still happens now in the Theravada countries, that when it's seen that like one tradition or one sub-tradition or another, that maybe the monks aren't practicing so well or aren't studying so well, what they do is they ask for monks from another Theravada country where the tradition's very strong to come over and give the ordination again and kind of like jumpstart everything. Yeah, so it's actually quite a wise technique to, jumpstart things and get people back on track. And it's created this bond among the Theravada countries where, the ordination, it's still the same ordination lineage, but it goes all over. But it's very interesting in the Theravada countries because on one hand it is the same, it's the same ordination, but on the other hand, they do have different lineages. Maybe I shouldn't say it's the same lineage. They do have different lineages within the Theravada ordination. Because I know in Thailand that they have two main nikayas, meaning like groups of monks. And if you belong to one and you go to live at the monastery of another one, you cannot take your ordination, your seat in ordination order, because they don't know, because you're from another group, if you keep Vinaya purely. So they want you to do like another ordination ceremony. It's called a dalikama. And so you kind of like get reordained in a ceremony in their particular branch. And then you can sit with the rest of the monks and do posada together and sit in your ordination thing. So they're quite particular about that. Let alone not accepting other Vinaya lineages outside of Theravada, even in Thailand. This is the way it is. Even within the Thai lineages, they don't always accept each other, They have to check you out. I don't know if it's that way in Sri Lanka and Burma. I don't know, but in Thailand it's like that. Okay. In the late 18th century Thailand, King Rama I began to remove elements of Brahmanism and Tantric practice, although traces live on today, with many Thai Buddhist temples hosting a statue of four-faced Brahma in their courtyard. So, similar to in Sri Lanka, you had some Mahayana elements, some Hindu elements, some Tantric elements, all going to Thailand. Now we're talking about Thailand here. And so, in the 18th century, the king, really started to remove them. But it's interesting because in most Thai temples, whether it's in Thailand or in another country, they have four-faced Brahma in the courtyard. Four-faced Brahma is a Hindu god. Yeah, but somehow, the people in the neighborhood, they have grown up seeing that, and they pay respect to Brahma before they, go into the temple. Then also, as interesting, in Thailand, they have this practice for many years of the kings also taking ordination and living as monastics before they assume the throne. Yeah, because in Thailand they have this thing of temporary ordination that most of the men do. It's considered very auspicious for the family, so they ordain for the period of one Vesa, what we call Varsa, the 3-month range retreat. And so even if they're married, even if, who knows what's going on, they still can go to the temple and become a bhikshu for those 3 months, return the ordination, and then go back to their wife or back to lay people, their lay life. In the Tibetan tradition, and I believe in the Chinese as well, you don't really receive the ordination if you don't have the intention to keep it for your own life, your whole life. Yeah. Now again, in Burma and Sri Lanka, I don't know if they do this temporary ordination thing, but in Thailand they do. They actually become fully ordained. Okay. At Gumpo Abbey, what they're doing, they aren't becoming fully ordained. I think they're taking 8 precepts or 10 precepts, or a little bit different. But, it's an interesting kind of thing, because some of my male friends in Singapore have done this. And didn't you do something similar, for women? Except women, they wouldn't let you take... Yeah, so you still had 5 precepts. But some of the men... You took 8 precepts, okay. But some of the men would take, I think some of them take the Shramanera, some of them take the whole bhikshu, and then they do it for 10 days or 2 weeks or something like this. And people really like it. And the idea behind it is, if you have lay people ordaining for a short period of time, first of all, it gives them experience of keeping good ethical conduct. It gives them experience of living as a monastic, and it helps them understand the life of the monastics, the role of the monastics, so that after they return to lay life, it's easier for them to support what the monastics are doing, because they understand it. So in one way, it's really good, and the people create a tremendous amount of merit keeping the precepts, and they say it's good for their whole family for 7 generations. I don't know about that, because I think that depends on your motivation. But it has a good quality to it. Yeah, in the Tibetans don't do that at all in terms of the full ordination. You can take the anagarika for a period of time, like for a year, for a month or something. So that's 8 precepts. Yeah, but they say you can't take the actual full ordination if you don't have the intention to keep it at the time you ordain. Yeah. If you change your mind afterwards, that's something else, but at the time you ordain. And I think it's the same for the Chinese. I don't think they, in Taiwan, in the Dharmakuptaka tradition, I think Singapore, this is influenced by the Theravada influence in Singapore, not from the Chinese influence. Okay, so then King Rama IV, who reigned 1851 to 1868, was a monk for nearly 30 years before ascending the throne. So he really understood the situation of Buddhism and the situation of the Sangha. And he witnessed the relaxed state of monastic discipline and of Buddhist education, and instituted a wide range of Sangha reforms. Okay, so importing an ordination lineage from Burma, see what I said, take, when something's degenerate in here, get a new ordination lineage. he began the Dhammayuttika Nikaya, unified the other sects into the Mahanikaya. So now you have two predominant ones, the Dhammayuttika and the Mahanikaya, and instructed both sects to keep the monastic precepts more strictly, and placed both under a single ecclesiastical authority. Revamping monastic education, he wrote a series of textbooks expressing a more rational approach to Dhamma, and eliminated elements of non-Buddhist folk culture attached to Thai Buddhism. As Thailand became more centralized, so let's just stop there for a moment. Okay, so this king was a monk, saw the state of Buddhism, saw the state of the Sangha. When he ascended the throne, then he made reforms to the Sangha. So here you have the start of this, and it's been going on already for a while, but the secular government, making, changing things for the Sangha. Okay? So he instructed them to keep the precepts more strictly. That's good. He placed them under one ecclesiastical authority. So he unified them, put them under one authority. Now, it's, but that authority is also under the government. Okay, so some difficulties come there. And then he wrote all these monastic textbooks. And so some people say, I've heard different views on this, that by rewriting all these textbooks and starting a whole series of exams, you have to study certain textbooks, pass certain exams, and then you can kind of go up the ladder in terms of your knowledge and your ability as a monk, because you have a better and better education. So in one way you can say that's really, really good, that he made it so that the monks got a better education, and they had to take exams and kind of, yeah. So that, on one hand, some people say is very, very good. In another way, what happened is in the villages, the Sangha wasn't just practicing Buddhism. They also had the role of they were the doctors. They were the ones the villagers went to when you had a ghost in your house, if you were sick because a spirit was harming you, if you wanted somebody in your family to get married and they needed a blessing. The monks couldn't marry them, but you could make offerings and get blessings for people who were sick or who were, needed help with their business. So a lot of that got wiped out. Okay, a lot of what the village monks were doing got wiped out when these reforms started. And then you have the whole forest tradition, which, lived in the forest, and Thailand used to have these magnificent forests. And as time went on, well into the 20th century, they started chopping down the forests, and that completely made it so that the Thai forest tradition, the monks, it was very hard for them to be wandering mendicants, because they used to just live in the forest and wander from place to place and do their meditation and live on alms. And it changed the whole thing, because with the lack of forests, and with them having to register with the government, then they had to live more in specific places. So then people started bringing food to the monasteries. They started collecting things as they became more settled. They couldn't do their practices well in the forest because all the villagers were coming. So the lack of forests really affected the forest tradition. Okay, so when I went to stay at a forest monastery in 2005, the village, they went on Pindapat, but a layperson came in a car, picked them up, drove them to the local town, they did Pindapat, got in the car and rode back, and then villagers would bring food to the monastery, and they were engaged in building projects and things like that. Yeah, and they had quite a nice life. They kept Vinaya strictly, but the food there was just over the top, So, so this, all these kind of changes by a government, by a modernizing society, it really affects how the Dharmas lived. And this actually happened in all the countries. We'll talk about that. Okay? So, so why some people say, well, it's very good that now the monks get a better education, they have to take tests, and so on. Then other people say, but now the government controls them more, and now they, the same functions that they used to serve in the villages, they don't serve. And actually the villages have changed too, with modernization. So, okay. So as Thailand became more centralized, the government assumed the authority to appoint preceptors to give ordination. So this is completely against the Vinaya. In the Vinaya, the secular government should have no control over what the monastics do. Yeah, but it happened in Thailand, because I think the king really, he did it as a way of helping Buddhism. Yeah, but it's funny that secular people are now the ones who say who can give ordination and who can't. That's not right for a Vinaya. From a Vinaya viewpoint, if you fulfill the qualities of a Vinaya preceptor, if you've been ordained a certain number of years and know a certain amount and keep the precepts well, then no government needs to appoint you. Okay. Then the Sangha Act of 1902 brought all monastics under royal control by centralizing administrative authority for the entire Sangha in the Supreme Sangha Council, headed by the Sangharaja. Okay, so before that, the government was exercising more control. Now in 1902, they put all the monastics under, the Supreme Sangha Council, headed by the Sangharaj, who, it's hard to say sometimes exactly how the Sangharaj, is appointed. So King Rama V's half-brother, Prince Vajrayana, wrote new textbooks that were the basis for national Sangha exams. These exams improved the monks' knowledge as well as distinguished the monks who could advance in ecclesiastical rank. Yeah, so monks get better education, they have more ranks, everything gets organized, systematized. Some people say this is great. Other people say now the government controls the whole thing, and that some of the monks now just try and learn to pass the exams so that they can move up in rank. So, it's an interesting thing. When you study history and society changes, one change that some people think is good, other people think is really bad. So is it bad? Is it good? Yeah? It's hard to say. It depends where you fall on how you think the Sangha should live. Because on one hand, if they're in the villages being too relaxed and, just doing, chasing away ghosts and things like that and not really meditating, then it's good that, they kind of have to shape up and learn more and pass exams. On the other hand, if that becomes a very rigid ecclesiastical order that impedes, a certain amount of flexibility, it gives a certain curriculum whereby people can't read other books. So, hard to tell sometimes. Okay. So you have in 1902 the Supreme Sangha Council. Yeah, then you're getting more exams, more textbooks. Okay. And then, and so that's where part of the, if we're going to talk about the nuns' ordination lineage in Thailand, part of the problem about restoring it there is, there's, of course, the Vinaya discussion, and different people say some people say it's possible, some people say it's not. But in Thailand in particular, the government made a rule in 1928 that nobody could ordain bhikkhunis. Because prior to that, one man had tried to have his 2 daughters ordained, and it was kind of a fiasco. So then the government made this policy. So this was part of the problem when Ajahn Brahm presided over, the affirming an ordination, is people said you broke the law, and the whole entire Thai Sangha has to keep, you're part of the Thai forest tradition, you broke this law which governs the Thai Sangha. And he said that law was made in Thailand. I live in Australia. How can that law pertain to me? And they said, it doesn't matter where you live, you're part of the tradition. Yeah. So then you see what kind of things go on, how things can get quite confusing. So now the people who are very conservative, they just cite that law and they say, it's impossible in terms of Vinaya. And also the government, who is in charge of the Sangha, says you can't do it. Okay. Now we're back to Sri Lanka. So colonialism hurt Buddhism in Sri Lanka, but the interest of a few Westerners in Buddhism, especially Theosophists Helena Blavatsky and Henry Olcott, spurred lay Buddhists such as Anagarika Dhammapala to present Buddhism in more rational terms and to connect with Buddhists internationally. Buddhism provided a rallying point for Sri Lanka in dealing with colonialism and establishing an independent nation. Okay, so here you see samenesses and differences. One is, as in Thailand, Buddhism is beginning to be presented in a more rational form, and some of the folk practices are, not being done as much. They're still done, but, not as much. Whereas Thailand was never colonized, Sri Lanka was. You had an influx of Christian missionaries trying to convert people, and, the whole effects of colonization of, the indigenous people losing their confidence, losing control of their land, and so on. Okay, so, and then they had Helena Blavatsky and Henry Olcott. So Blavatsky was a whole other case. She was like, having seances or hearing voices from Tibetan masters, from, the beyond, and, so I don't know if interest like that, it helps, it doesn't help. Henry Olcott, on the other hand, he was a theosophist, but he was one who really started presenting Buddhism in a much more rational way. Yeah. So nowadays, our Theravada friends present, their Buddhism in a very rational way. We don't have a lot of rites and rituals and these kinds of things. Of course, all Buddhist traditions have rites and rituals. But, that's because people like Olcott, guided it in a certain way. And those things, because they didn't fit in with Western perspectives, got tapped down a little bit, especially in colonized countries, or countries that are trying to modernize and appear more Western. Yeah. So this was one of the things. I mean, Tibet was never colonized. Yeah. And so all these things still went on, and that's why the Christian missionaries, a few Christians kind of made it to Tibet. That's why they called it Lamaism, because they said, oh, they worship their lamas, and the Dalai Lama's a God king. Yeah. And so, because Tibet had not had these kinds of elements taken out by some colonial power or by rulers who wanted to make the tradition appear more modern, whereas that was the case in Sri Lanka and Thailand. This is my historical commentary. Somebody else may disagree with it, but this is what I think. Okay, so then you have people like Anagarika Dhammapala, who, he was a very bright, articulate young man, and who said, yes, Buddhism needs to modernize, and we need to, make contacts with international sources. And so he went to Europe, and he went here and there and met all sorts of people. And he was quite a prominent figure in this whole thing of modernizing, the presentation of Buddhism and acting as a Buddhist representative in Europe. Because at that time, Europeans, what did they know about Buddhism? Nothing. Okay, so colonialism did not harm Buddhism in Burma as much, and it actually stimulated the king to request monks to teach Vipassana meditation in the court. So this is like that didn't happen in Thailand and Sri Lanka, but, wow, what a thing, bringing in the monks into the court and having them teach meditation. And so soon, lay people from all social classes were learning to meditate. So the monks Ledi Sayadaw, who lived 1846 to 1923, and Mingon Sayadaw is 1868 to 1955. They set up lay meditation sessions, and Mahasi Sayadaw from 1904 to 82 passed his teachings on to lay teachers. And so this meditation style is now very popular in Burma. Okay, so the kings there invited the monks. They didn't have nuns in Burma, they had nuns, but they were either 8 precept or 10 precept, and they weren't considered actual Sangha, and still aren't, actually. And if a Burmese nun becomes a bhikshuni and goes back to Burma, she gets imprisoned and disrobed. That happened to one nun a few years ago. So anyway, here they invited the monks into the court, started the court meditating, then, got all sorts of lay people meditating, started all these series of lay meditation centers. Okay, so Mahasi Sayadaw is the one who founded, this tradition of what he calls mindfulness, which is actually bare attention. His tradition of Vipassana is just watching, the body, scanning the body, what's going on in the body, and being aware of that. And he passed that to Goenka. Goenka was a layman from India who lived in Burma. There was a large Indian community in Burma. So he learned that style of meditation, and then Goenkaji spread it all over the place. And so he has meditation centers everywhere, in so many, in India and Burma, but many Western countries. So they're the people who do the 10-day retreats. And your first 3 days, I think you're concentrating on serenity, shamatha, and then the rest you do Vipassana, his style of Vipassana, scanning the body. And they've become very, very popular. Goenkaji died sometime last year, I think, and so it was a great loss. And it's interesting how his organization is structured, because even when he was alive, his senior students could not teach. At all the retreats, you watch videos of Goenka teach. Yeah, and the senior students just acted as consultants. So it is going to be quite interesting what happens, if they keep doing this, giving the teaching via, video like this. On one hand, it preserves the teachings exactly as he gave them. In another way, it distances people from feeling a connection with a teacher. Yeah. And so he developed this huge lay organization that's quite popular. And then Mahasi Sayadaw's style of meditation, also in Sri Lanka, many people do it. In Thailand, they do a lot. Some people do more shamatha, some people vipassana, but they have their own kind of meditation techniques for that. It isn't so much Mahasi's one. And I don't think in Sri Lanka everybody does Mahasi Sayadaw's method, but some people do. Okay. The means to select a Sangha Raja differ. In Thailand, they are generally appointed by the king. That means that the head of all of the Sangha in the entire country is under the authority of the secular government, the king, which, in one way, they get plenty of support. In another way, you better do what the king and the government want, okay? It's starting nowadays. Some people are speaking up a little bit more in the press in Bangkok, but the king people have incredible respect for him, yeah, and even in the monasteries, they always dedicate the merit for the king and the queen. There's been some scandals in the court recently, but never mind. The old king's rather old, he's rather old now. They're not sure what's going to happen. Okay, so in Thailand, and the Sangha Raj, he passed away a few years ago too, and now there's somebody who's acting as a Sangha Raj, but I don't think they've appointed a new one, because to be a new one, they take them from a group of elders, and some of the elders are pretty elderly. So I'm not sure, when they'll have a new Thai Sangha Raj. They have somebody acting in that position now. Okay, in Thailand, the Sangha Rajas are generally appointed by the king. In other countries, monastic seniority or a semi-democratic process are used. The authority of Sangha Rajas varies. Some are figureheads, don't do much. Others are such as the late Maha Ghosananda of Cambodia. Do you remember him? He died a few years ago. Incredible monk. Really worked for peace. He did all these peace marches. He went to the UN. He was a real peace worker. Quite amazing. I never met him, but I just heard about him. So other Sangha Rajas, such as the late Mahaghosananda of Cambodia, have great influence by virtue of their practice, their beneficial works, and advancement of social change. So that was definitely the case with him. Yeah, he did a lot, not only for the Sangha, but for the country. Thailand's Sangha Raj, a position existing since the 18th century, is part of a national hierarchy handling issues of importance to the Sangha. He has no legal authority of monastics. No, he has legal authority over monastics. What? He has legal authority over monastics, works with the secular government, and is assisted by the Supreme Sangha Council. In Cambodia, the Sangha Raj position disappeared during the Khmer period, but in 1981 the government reestablished it. Okay, so it's kind of different in each of the Theravada countries. But this whole thing of Buddhism being under the secular government, when we talk about Buddhism in China, Buddhism in Tibet, it's going to come up again. Yeah, because you have to remember that, not ancient, but until the last few centuries, and even now, many governments are and were headed by kings or, some kind of leader where it was passed down, through the family. England still has a king. I think Denmark does, and lots of countries do. And the Australians still, pay respects to the king, queen, and yeah. So, when you have societies like that, where you have an emperor or a king or a queen or somebody like that, then, and you're a religion in that society, you have to stay in the good graces of whoever has political power. Because if you aren't in the good graces of whoever has political power, they will wipe you out. In the States, we've grown up with this idea of religious freedom, and we take it for granted, and we know that nobody in the government can come and close us down just because we exist and we don't believe what they believe. But, in some countries, that's definitely the thing. So when Buddhism went to different countries and it was a new religion, it had to be very, very careful. Yeah. In China, that comes up a lot. We'll get to it. Okay, in many cases, national governments instituted changes that had the side effect of lessening the Sangha's traditional role as teachers and doctors and supplanting them with secular systems of modern education and medicine. So this is what happened in the Thai villages, for example, and the Sri Lankan villages, the Burmese villages. As government, you had increased industrialization, increased technology, governments got centralized, they came out from colonial rule. Then they started having more effect on far-reaching parts of the country. And modern education, they started having modern education, more modern medicine. And so the Sangha, who used to be the educators, who used to be the doctors, their role is now changing. Yeah, so that happened a lot in the 20th century, a whole lot. Late 19th, early 20th, late 19th, and throughout the 20th century, I think this happened a lot. As a result, Theravada monastics, as well as their brethren in countries following the Sanskrit tradition, have had to rethink their role in society in the face of modernization. And so in China, you'll see, what they started to do in the nationalist period before they were suppressed by the Chinese government. The Tibetans are just dealing with it in the last 50 years. Yeah, because in 1959, they just kept themselves apart from everybody. They didn't even let tourists come in, people come in. We have the pictures from our friend's uncle who worked for the Chicago Tribune. He was one of a handful, literally a handful of foreigners allowed in Tibet. So then all of a sudden they have to come out in 59. They're like, we don't know what to do. Yeah. They didn't even have wheeled vehicles that they used, and in old Tibet, and all of a sudden they're refugees, and what do? Here's this, it's all different, because like in Tibet, you sent your most intelligent child to the monastery because, well, if you were nobility, your kids can get an education. But if you weren't nobility, like most people, the only way your kid could get an education and could, do well for the family was to go to the monastery. They were the educators. They were the doctors. Still now, in Tibetan society, when somebody's sick, they'll go to the lamas and have a puja done. Westerners will do that as well. When people have mental health difficulties, they'll have pujas done. They have all sorts of different things that the lamas will do because they say most mental health issues come about because of spirit interference. So they'll do many things, for that. So it's very, very different culture. Yeah. So some of the Theravada countries have been changing more, but Tibet was really thrust into it in the last 50 years. And I watched when I was in Dharamsala, once they started having, because when I first went to Dharamsala, hardly anybody had a telephone. I mean, forget having a telephone. And cars, hardly anybody had a car. You walked everywhere. And then when they started having movies, they would bring these videos in and show them in town, and, just these little rooms and show videos, kung fu movies, they like. Okay, then the monks started going to the kung fu movies because they're young boys and they have the kung fu energy and they think it's great. And the older monks didn't know what to do. What do we do? They had never had that problem before because there were never videos before. Yeah? So what do you do? Do you let them go? Do you not let them go? It was this huge shock to them. Yeah? How do you keep monastic discipline? Then when all the tourists started coming, and then the younger ones start making friends with tourists. How do you keep your monastic discipline when that's going on? Yeah, it's very, very difficult, this whole thing of modernity for traditional peoples. And Buddhism in many countries was so linked into the traditional way of life. That really got jolted by colonialism, the world wars, they got dragged into the wars, especially the British trying to colonize China. Oh my goodness, what a mess that was. Okay. So now the next section is Buddhism in China. So we're talking a lot about this because, like I said before, I think it gives you some background information about why the traditions are the way they are and the kind of challenges people face. And of course, now we're facing challenges too. So Buddhism entered China in the 1st century AD, first via the Silk Road from Central Asian lands where Buddhism flourished, and later by sea from India and Sri Lanka. Okay, so remember this morning I said that while the Buddha was alive, Buddhism, started spreading all over India, and then of course after he passed away, it spread even more. So, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all those, that whole Central Asian area was all flourishing Buddhism, You may remember a few years ago, the Taliban blew up those huge Buddhist statues in Bamyan. They were incredible. I was able to see them when I was there, and when was it, 72, 73. But it was just amazing, because there's enormous statues of the Buddha and then a whole thing of interconnected caves in the side of the mountain there, where people had meditated hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And if you go to a museum in Peshawar or some of the other countries, they have a lot of Buddhist, artifacts and so on. Udiana, where Guru Rinpoche was from, that's the Swat Valley, where they, last year and the year before, they had so much killing and murder going on there. It used to be a huge Buddhist area. Yeah, so, sometimes I think, wow, what was it like in Central Asia when Buddhism flourished? Because, they were translating a lot into the Central Asian languages. It was on the Silk Road. So you had, that's how Buddhism started going into China, was through the people on the Silk Road. And you have some of the great Buddhist leaders early on in China coming that route. They were Central Asian people going into China, learning the language, helping to translate. It was amazing. And then you had Chinese going through that way, crossing over the Karakoram Mountains into India. I mean, it took them years to make this journey along the Silk Road, and hundreds, probably thousands of them died, especially, the Chinese kind of trying to come into India to get the texts. I mean, so many people died crossing the Gobi Desert, crossing the Karakoram Mountains. And when you think of it, it can be so moving, because these people, they risked their life for the sake of the Dharma. And of course, the ones who made it back, or the ones who kept journals, we know their names, Shrasang and Yi Jing, and, different people, Fa Xian. We know their names, but how many people died in the process, but because of their efforts, the other ones made it? Yeah, and due to their kindness, then all these texts went to China. And later on, same thing with Tibetans going to India, crossing the Himalayas. Now, not easy. Not easy. And, and so these people really went through something for the sake of the teachings. And then with so much compassion brought these texts back to their own countries. So I think it's very good sometimes for us to really think about this and read some history and know what it was like. And then we really begin to see how, when people say, oh, I don't want to go to the Dharma Center, it's too long, it's too far away, I have to drive a half an hour. Come on, It's like, what are people complaining about? And you can see that's the extent to which they really value the Dharma, is they don't want to drive an extra half an hour. Whereas here people spent their entire lifetimes, going to another country to get their teachings and bring them back and then translate them. Totally amazing what they've done. And, they cross by foot, or sometimes maybe on a camel or something like that. But they walked a lot of the way. You see the drawings of Xuanzang, carrying a whole backpack, not with his camping gear and his boots, but a backpack full with texts that go up to here. Yeah. Incredible people these were, and we're so indebted to them, so indebted. Yeah. Without them, where would we be? Any of these people who brought Buddhism to any of the other countries. Okay, by the 2nd century, a Chinese Buddhist monastery existed, and translation of Buddhist texts into Chinese was underway. Early translations employed inconsistent terminology, leading to some misunderstandings of Buddhist thought. But by the 5th century, translation terms became more settled. So, because of Confucianism and Taoism were both very widespread in China, when Buddhism came there, they started using mostly Taoist, maybe some Confucian terms, to translate Buddhist ideas. But then people, when they hear that term, they give it the Taoist meaning, so it creates misunderstanding. So it's like here, if you call Dakinis angels, yeah, because angel is a word everybody knows, yeah. Or if you call bodhisattvas saviors, or if you use the language of Christianity, it gives people a different meaning than it actually is the Buddhist meaning. So that happened in China as well. But it began to get, the vocabulary began to get, translation terms began to get more systematized. For many centuries, emperors sponsored translation teams. So a wealth of Buddhist sutras, teaching treatises and commentaries from India and Central Asia were translated into Chinese. Okay, the ordination lineage for the monks came from the Silk Road. For the nuns, it came from Sri Lanka by boat. That's how they got enough of the nuns in there to have a dual ordination in the 5th century. So Chinese Buddhism contains a diversity of schools. Some views and practices are common to all schools, while others are unique to individual schools. Some schools are differentiated based on their philosophical tenets, others on their manner of practice, others by their principal texts. And so historically there were 10 schools in China. Not all of them exist now, but historically these were 10 major ones. So first one was Chan. In Japanese it's Zen. Okay, the word is actually the Sanskrit word dhyana, or the Pali word jhana, which refers to the 4 states of concentration after serenity, after you attain serenity. So Chan was brought to China by the Indian meditation master Bodhidharma in the early 6th century. He was the 28th Indian patriarch and the first Chinese patriarch of this school. But I don't know that they had the term Chan as an individual school in India. I think it was more he came there and then they traced the lineage back that way. Okay. Currently, 2 sub-branches of Chan existed. The Linjai, or in Japanese Rinzai, Linji, or Rinzai, and the Kaodang, or Soto, those 2 traditions. Linji primarily uses Huatu, which is koans, puzzling statements that challenge practitioners to go beyond the limits of the conceptual mind. And they also speak of sudden awakening, this idea of sudden awakening. And Kaodang focuses more on just sitting and takes a more gradual approach. Actually, this idea of sudden awakening, some people present it as, you're just Joe Blow and then boing, you're enlightened all of a sudden completely. Yeah. The people, nowadays, the masters who practice it, they explain it's not like that. It's you've done a whole lot of practice beforehand. You get some glimpse in this life, and then you have to go back and do all the rest of the creation of merit and other meditations and things. You're not fully enlightened yet. It's some kind of taste, but, not the whole thing. And, Master Xian Yen from Dharma Drum Society. That's the way he describes it. Okay. So early Chan masters relied on the Lankavatara Sutra. Yeah, some of you know Lankavatara Sutra, Chittamatra. and also the Prajnaparamita Sutras, such as the Vajrayana Sutra, the Diamond Sutra. And some later adopted the Tathagata Garbha, or Buddhist essence ideas. So this is a whole other thing. Okay, so here in Chan you have Chittamatra influence, Madhyamaka influence, and then Tathagata Garbha. So Tathagata Garbha is this school. It was maybe the latest one to become prominent, or the sutras, to be seen. Well, maybe not. No, because the Tibetans say Maitreya and a Sangha wrote about it. So it probably, the Tathagata Garbha Sutra probably came earlier, but it didn't become more popular until later, at least in Tibet. It became very popular in China. And that's the school that talks so much, or the text that talks so much about Buddha nature. And, we are Buddhas at our heart and core and essence. We are Buddhas. And, it presents a whole different way of kind of looking at human beings, as if, everything is already there. You just have to see it. Okay. So the Jonangpas relied a lot on the Tathagata Garbha. Yeah. Okay, the Surangama Sutra is popular also in Chinese Chan. And in Chinese monasteries, they chant the Surangama Sutra. I should bring in a computer and play it for you. It's very powerful when you hear it chanted. The mantra from the sutra. Okay, nowadays most Korean Chan practitioners and some Chinese ones learn Madhyamaka, the middle way philosophy, and Dogen Zenji and Myoan Aisai were instrumental in bringing Zen to Japan in the 13th century. So it really went to Japan quite late, 13th century, but became very, very popular. Okay, then the second one is the Pure Land School. Okay, in Chinese it's Jingtu, or in Japanese Jodo. Jodo, yeah. So this school is based on the 3 Pure Land Sutras, which you also have in the Tibetan tradition. The smaller and larger Sukhavati Vyuha Sutras and the Amitayudhyani Sutra. Okay? So it emphasizes, this school emphasizes chanting the name of Amitabha Buddha and making fervent prayers to be reborn in his Pure Land, which provides all circumstances necessary to practice the Dharma and attain full awakening. The Pure Land can also be viewed as the pure nature of our own minds. Chinese masters such as Zhi Yi, Hanshen Deching, and Oi Shi Shu, excuse my pronunciation, wrote commentaries on the Pure Land practice, discussing how to attain serenity and realize the nature of reality while meditating on Amitabha. After the 9th century, Pure Land practice was integrated into many other Chinese schools, and today many Chinese monasteries practice both Chan and Pure Land. Honen took the Pure Land teachings to Japan in the late 12th century. Okay, so when you talk to people who practice Pure Land, when you talk to lay people in the general public, they think Pure Land practice is just chanting Namo Amitofo. And, in China, when you had a huge population that was illiterate, presenting the teachings like that was a way to get more and more people practicing and more people involved. And if you could memorize the sutras, good. If you couldn't, focus your mind on Amitabha Buddha and recite Namo Amitofo. Okay? So then some people began to say, oh, you just say Amitofo 10 times and you're going to be born in Sukhavati. And, you have all these kind of statements, what His Holiness calls propaganda statements. So they're said like this in order to encourage people to do the practice, and you see people with amazing devotion to Amitabha and to Kuan Yin, whole life just chanting like that, really amazing devotion. What many people don't know, what those people don't know anyway, is there's a whole body of literature written by Chinese sages on a more sophisticated method of meditating on Amitabha that lays out actually the different kinds of practices that you need to do in order to be born in the Pure Land. It isn't just reciting the, Namo Amitofo 10 times or however many it was. So some of those texts have been translated into English. We have them in our library. They're very interesting, because you use, either the figure of Amitofo or the sound of the mantra as your meditation object for developing serenity. Yeah? And you may notice, because we do the Amitofo chanting here, we don't do it so long to really get the effect. But if you do it and you do it really, really fast, your whole mind gets completely focused on Amitofo. There's no room for anything else. Your mind, very, very focused. So very good for developing serenity. And then when they stop the chanting, it's after all this, focused chanting out loud, then it's completely silent. And you look at the nature of the mind. Yeah? So, there's a lot of meditation methods that can be used in this. Also, when you're chanting Namo Amitofo, they, as part of a meditation on emptiness, you ask, who is chanting Namo Amitofo? Who is chanting? Yeah? Very good practice. Who is the person who's chanting? Yeah? Who is Amitofo that you're meditating on? Yeah, so really getting into the selflessness of persons. Okay. And then this practice too, it's seen as a sutra practice by the Chinese, but because you see, with the early Buddhism, you didn't have much talk about all these bodhisattvas and doing practices of different bodhisattvas. When the Mahayana really developed and became more widespread, then you had, practices of Manjushri and Samantabhadra and Kuan Yin and Amitofo. And Amitofo wasn't a bodhisattva, he was a Buddha, but, all of these different practices. And in China, they're seen as sutra practices. Yeah. In Tibet, all of these have become tantric practices. So here's where, in Kriya Tantra, yeah, so here's where you see the development, in India as it started out when first no bodhisattva practices, then you started getting some, then on the basis of that, then Tantra became more popular and widespread. So you have this kind of development going on in the culture that enabled people to accept different things. Yeah. And so actually, one of the steps in Chinese Pure Land is when you're reading the Amitabha Sutra, it gives the whole layout of what the Pure Land looks like. So it's like in tantric practice, visualizing the mandala and the different deities in the mandala, you visualize the whole Pure Land with Amitabha, the 9 different kinds of lotuses, and the trees made of jewels, and the wind teaching the Dharma. And I mean, it's an incredible description when you read it that really makes your mind go, wow, like if I could visualize this, then, I mean, because you know how it is. If you think about something beautiful, your mind gets inspired. If you think about something ugly, your mind just goes flat. So the same kind of thing, if you can imagine the Pure Land like that. Okay. And then the Pure Land also being viewed as the pure nature of our own mind. So there's a lot of teachings on this that many people don't know about, unfortunately. Then a third Chinese tradition is Tiantai, and that was founded by Shu Huisi. You should help me with these names. Oh, you don't know the tone. Okay, well. Okay. So he lived 515 to 576. Okay. And his disciple, Ji, established a gradual progression of practices from the easiest to the most profound, with the ultimate teachings founded on the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, which is the Lotus Sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, and Nagarjuna's Mahaprajna Paramita Uddesha. And this school balances study and practice. So China, also got this whole bunch of different literature, and they didn't know how, they also had to systematize it in some way. The Tibetans did it in terms of the different tenet systems, and Atisha did it in terms of the 3 capacities of beings. And then here in China, Xi did it by, selecting out different sutras and putting them in order in terms of, what practices they teach, what philosophies they espouse, of how somebody should go about developing along the path. And so he said the Lotus Sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which in the Sanskrit is very different than the Pali Mahaparinirvana Sutra. And then Nagarjuna's Mahaprajna Paramita Upadesa. So this is a text that, this one by Nagarjuna, they don't have it in Tibetan, as far as I understand, if I remember correctly. They don't have this text. It's a huge text. We have the translation. My friend Dharma Mitra translated at least part of it, and it's in our library. Incredible text. Really beautiful, Mahayana teaching. Yeah. I don't know why the Tibetans say, maybe Nagarjuna wasn't the author, somebody else wrote it. But I don't know, or maybe it was something that went to China very early on. I'm really not sure of the history of this text. Yeah. But it was also, it's a main text that a lot of people in China refer to. Huge text. Then the fourth is Huayan, or Keigon in Japanese. And so that's based on the Avatamsaka Sutra that was translated into Chinese around 420. And Dushun and Zogmi were the great Huayan masters. So Huayan, the Avatamsaka Sutra, we have the English translation by Thomas Cleary, and I know of another English translation that's coming out too that's probably better. But the King of Prayers is found in there, okay? So huge sutra with many sub-sutras in it. The Dasabhumika, the 10 Bhumi Sutra that describes the 10 Bodhisattva Bhumis, is in the Avatamsaka Sutra. So the Huayan tradition, emphasizes the interdependence of all people and phenomena and the interpenetration of their worlds. Okay? The individual affects the world and the world affects the individual. Huayan philosophy also emphasizes the bodhisattva's activities in the world to benefit all beings. So when we this thing about the interpenetration of the worlds, you could see it in the King of Prayers, On one atom, you have the whole universe with the Buddha and the bodhisattvas, in the space of an atom, things happening in, a very short period of time. So this whole relativity of time and space. Yeah? And so that's definitely influenced the Tibetan tradition as well. Yeah, even though the Huayan, which is a homegrown Chinese tradition, isn't in Tibet, the sutra it's founded on, the Avatamsaka, is a prominent sutra in the Tibetan canon. Okay, then the fifth is Sanlun, or the Madhyamaka school, and that was founded by the great Indian translator Kumarajiva, who lived 334 to 415. He was fantastic. Kumarajiva was one of these totally brilliant people, who took material, who was a translator, he wrote commentaries, he got so much going in terms of Buddhism in China. Okay, so the school was founded by Kumarajiva and principally relies on the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, so Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way. Okay, the Dvadasanikaya Sutra, Shastra by Nagarjuna, which again, I don't think they have this in the Tibetan. I'll check, but I don't think they have that one. Which again is strange, because Madhyamaka went to China before it went to Tibet. And there is an English translation, at least of part of that Shastra. And then the Sataka Shastra of Aryadeva, so that's related to the Chinese don't have the 400 stanzas. They have a text by Aryadeva with 100 stanzas. But many of the 100 are the same in the 400. And then sometimes Nagarjuna's Mahaprajnaparamita Upadesha, this text I talked about in relationship to the Tentai, it's also added as a fourth principal Sanlun text. Sanlun means 3 treatises. Okay, so Sanlun relies on the Prajnaparamita Sutras and follows the Akasamati Nirdesha Sutra in asserting that these sutras reveal the definitive meaning of the Buddhist teachings. So in that way, it's very much very similar to the Tibetans, in relying on the Akashamati Nirdesha Sutra in terms of what's provisional and what's definitive. Yeah. Okay. Then the 6th is the Yogacarya, or Faxiang in Chinese, Hoso in Japanese. So that's based on the Samdhinirmochana Sutra. Remember this one? Sutra Unraveling the Thought? Siddhamata Sutra, the Yogacarya, yeah. And on the Yogacarya Bhumi Shastra, and the Dvinjatapita Matra Siddhi Shastra, and other treatises by Maitreya, Asanga, and Vasubandhu. And then Xuanzang, from 602 to 664, translated these important texts and established this school after his return from India. And then there became 3 kind of streams of the Yogacarya Yogacarya in China. Then the seventh one is the Vajrayana, in Chinese Zhenyan, or in Japanese Shingon. And it's based on the Mahavairochana Sutra, the Vajrasheka Sutra, the Adya Rasatika Prajnaparamita Sutra, and the Susiddhikara Sutra, which explain Yoga Tantra practices. So the new Tibetan schools talk about 4 classes of Tantra. Kriya, my mind went one. Action, performance, Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and Mahayoga. Okay, and so yoga was the third, and so the Vajrayana that was in China was, relied on this third class. They didn't really have the Mahalanatara Yoga texts going there, and when they did go, there was a monk named Ninghai. Well, he'll come up. Who gave some tantric initiations, and the way that in the highest class tantra that certain things are depicted and explained was really antithetical to Chinese sensibilities. So the highest class tantra, did not go over well there, and still doesn't with many people. So the tantric school was never widespread in China, and this school was brought to Japan by Kukai in the late 8th, early 9th century, and it's still existent there. And I have a friend who's American who was a Shingon priest. I haven't seen her in many years, but the tradition is very popular. When you go in a Shingon temple, they do a lot of fire pujas. So just as we set up 8 offerings, they have them set up. And, there's a lot of things that are similar to our tantric practice. Then I want to finish this section here. Then the Satya Siddhi school is based on the Satya Siddhi Shastra, which is an Abbey. Oh, I forgot the Vinaya school. Thank you. Okay. So that was founded by Dao Xuan, which we hear so much about, in the Venerable Benyen's teachings. He quotes Venerable Dao Xuan all the time. So he lived 596 to 667, and principally relies on the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya, which was translated into Chinese in 412. And 4 other Vinayas were also translated into Chinese. See if I can remember them. The Mahasangika, Mahashisheka, Mula Sravastivada, and Sravastivada. And so different ones were prominent in different parts of Tibet, China at different times. And then the emperor in, 709, I think? Was that it? He made a ruling that they should use the Dharmaguptaka for all the ordinations and as the principal Vinaya that they rely on. So the Chinese are kind of unique because they have in their canon translations of 5 Vinayas. The Tibetans have 1, the Theravadas have 1. So the Chinese, their philosophy is you follow the Dharmaguptaka, but then if there's one of the other Vinayas that has a more detailed explanation of a certain point, then you add that into your practice. Okay, then the Satya Siddhi school is based on the Satya Siddhi Shastra, an Abhidharma style text that discusses emptiness amongst other topics. And some people say it emphasizes the Shravaka, or the hearer vehicle. Others say it bridges the hearer vehicle and bodhisattva vehicle, but it doesn't exist anymore. And then the Abhidharma school, called Kosha, you know, interesting, was based on the Abbey Dharmakosha by Vasubandhu, and was introduced into China by Xuanzang. So Vasubandhu was, very prominent in both Tibet and China. And some people say there was more than one Vasubandhu. Some scholars say that. I don't think the traditions necessarily agree. Well, this school was popular in the Golden Age of Buddhism during the Tang Dynasty, from the 7th to the early 10th century. It is small now. Okay, so we'll stop here, and then tomorrow we'll go into more about the relationships of those schools. Okay.